Before we get into all the big reviews, I have got one email that I had to read because it tickled me. It's a good question anyway, but it tickled me because of one letter there's a misprint. But it is from Eric from Cumberland, Rhode Island. And he writes, Dear Jim, recently I came across a YouTube video of the fastest professional wrestlers. It showed the McGuire twins, Happy Humphrey and Haystacks Calhoun in action.
The fastest.
That should have been 2 T's in there, Eric. The fattest. That's what he meant to say. The fattest professional wrestlers. Oh, it showed the McGuire twins, Happy Humphrey and Haystacks Calhoun in action. And all 4 were more entertaining and intriguing to me than all of today's garbage wrestlers. Any cool stories about these guys would be appreciated. And I like that they were indeed some of the fastest professional wrestlers. We mentioned Haystacks Calhoun here a week or two ago, and I popped you because I actually did meet and see Haystacks Calhoun live in action, but I never met Happy Humphrey, obviously. Do the people today, Mean Gene, do they even know who the McGuire twins were? Or do we have to start this from the ground up? Where's our audience on this? Great Brian Last.
Well, 2 things. One is, I don't know how entertaining the McGuire twins were. Well, but secondly, people may not know them by name, but the image of the 2 overweight twins on motorcycles, I think, is still known.
Okay, well, there you go. They do it on Family Guy and The Simpsons. The 2 identical 700-pound twins on motorcycles were Benny and Billy McGuire. And this wasn't new to wrestling. It started in the 30s and really blossomed in the 40s. The freak show guys, and that's a politically incorrect term, but I mean, when I was a kid, you went to the state fair. They still had the Sideshow and the freak show where they had the world's fattest man or fattest woman and the world's smallest. Or, the bearded woman or JoJo the dog-faced boy or Zippy the pinhead or whatever, right next to the fucking cow with 5 legs. And you paid 50 cents and went in and saw that. And the fat man would talk to you and scare the little kiddies.
Yeah, Jack Pfeffer had Blimp Levy.
Yes, Martin the Blimp Levy, who I actually have a poster from New Haven, Connecticut, the Coliseum there in 1946, I believe. The Blimp versus the Angel, because wow. That was a big drawn match in the 40s. Think about this. In the wrestling business, a lot of the guys went in service, and Longson, I guess, was past the age at that point. He was the world champion. He's the biggest gate attraction in wrestling, but he's actually one of the very few in the World War II years, one of the very few gate attractions. And that's when Pfeffer had gotten the Blimp, and then the Angel, the original Angel, the French Angel, and the freak show guys. They were too old, they couldn't pass physical, they were foreign citizens, they weren't in the army, right? And they pushed that a lot, and also because it's hot-shotting to do a freak show match. It's the same thing in MMA. They've done it in the past 20 years with the 7-foot giant. Or the guy with, pituitary gland issue against, and Manny Yarborough in the first UFC pay-per-view was 600 pounds, right? So anyway, it started there and it did well in the war years. And then they kind of got entrenched. That was part of what you saw with the wrestling crew was you got the wrestlers, you got the baby face, the heels, the cowboys, the Indians, all the different gimmicks. You got the giants and the freaks. And the midgets and the girls, bring, as the old poster went, bring the midgets. The kids are wrestling tonight, right? So anyway, Happy Humphrey, what did he start? Probably early 50s. His name was William J. Cobb. He was from Macon, Georgia. He's in the Guinness Book of World Records he was at one time up and through the early 70s, at least. He was on record as the world's heaviest man in history. He got up to 802 pounds. Coincidentally, the same weight that Yokozuna was at when they wouldn't license him anymore in New York in 96. Go ahead.
I was going to say, have you seen the pictures of him when he first started? Because he was nowhere near that big when he first started.
No, well, look at all the big guys. They always gain weight throughout their careers. Haystacks Calhoun, they always build him at 601 pounds from Morgan Corners, Arkansas. He probably never was 600 ever, but he was bigger when he was almost ready to retire than he was when he was a young man. But the McGuires really, when they started wrestling, they were billed at 660 and 640. And that probably was close, if not slight exaggeration, but they were in the Guinness Book of World Records too for world's heaviest twins. And did that, they got up to mid 700s before, and I never remember which, either Benny or Billy had the weight loss surgery. Which one was it? Do you know?
I don't know.
But one had weight loss surgery and one died very young. And so they, but they gained in their wrestling career, which lasted less than 10 years, or probably maybe 10 years max. They gained 150 pounds apiece. Anyway, Happy Humphrey, he was the guy in the 50s, and of course he was being booked out of the Central States. I guess Gus Karras, a Kansas City promoter, and he put the local kid with him to drive him around because Happy Humphrey couldn't fucking drive. He was too fat to reach the steering wheel, and that's how Harley Race, that was his first major job in the wrestling business. And because Humphrey couldn't get into a lot of the showers, they said Harley would have to take a fucking garden hose and take him out in the parking lot and hose him off. But he was just a guy that I've seen some film clips. He was just a guy that was he was like a giant Ronnie Gossett. Ronnie was like a human waterbed. He had no weight to him. He was just huge. It was all, I'm not even knocking Ronnie Gossett. I loved Ronnie Gossett. He was a funny fucker, but he was just all flab and no muscle. And Happy Humphrey, I think, was the same thing, because a guy that size with all those, the various fat rolls and everything, anyway, then Haystacks Calhoun came along, late 50s, got over real good with Vince Sr. and in the Northeast. And so he was the big guy wrestler for all of the 60s. He was the name, and early 70s. And they tried, they found the kid in, in Louisiana, T. John Thibodeau, that had to be 700 pounds. And he was just a big, huge fucking human waterbed too. And Man Mountain Mike, right, was probably about the same size as Haystacks. He was the West Coast Haystacks Calhoun. They used him on top out there. Maybe it was, they had to fly him across the country freight. That might have been a trans might have been an issue. And then the McGuires came along and did the twin thing. And I actually met Billy and Benny and talked to them a couple different times and saw them live several times. And they were just the nicest country boys from, I think, Hendersonville, North Carolina, and just had voices and just talked like that. And they were nice, and they were made wrestlers because of their size, and it was an attraction, and they never worked a territory. It was even more like Andre's schedule, that you didn't get a good match out of them. You booked them to come in against a heel team that had a lot of heat, because that way but were bumping heels, so the heels could bump off of them, and you never, it was just to embarrass the heels and or to see these guys in a match on the card against some underneath heels, just to see them and pay to see them, maybe once every couple of years. They didn't, because there wasn't anything else they could do. And that's not a knock on them either. It's just there wasn't anything else they could do. They'd waddle down the aisle in those jumpsuits that they had made, the matching jumpsuits. And especially where the ropes were cables instead of real ropes, they would actually have to take the bottom rope, one of the turnbuckles, they'd unscrew it and take the bottom rope down so that they could roll into the ring under the second rope, because they couldn't get under the bottom rope. Did you ever see that? You never saw them. definitely in person. You weren't fucking born. What am I saying?
I've only seen a few clips of him actually wrestling, but never saw them live, obviously.
Well, yeah, and what the deal was, they worked Louisville probably in the 70s, probably 4 times. I saw them, I think, 2 of those times. A couple of them were even before I started going. But they'd take the bottom rope off, they'd roll in, and they'd bring out, if they didn't have ring stairs, they'd bring out a box, a big wooden thing, so that, because they couldn't get on the apron, right? Because the apron wasn't wide enough. So the partner that was on the apron would have to stand. You know, as a matter of fact, they stood on a box one time, and one time he stood inside the ring because that was when they had the smaller ring ropes. He couldn't step through the fucking ring, or couldn't step through the ropes. Anyway, the point is the heels would just bump off of him, and they couldn't do anything for a couple minutes, and then they'd gouge one of the brothers' eyes, and he'd be blind, and they'd choke him over the rope, and it'd get a little steam, and then he'd finally waddle over and make the tag to the other brother, who would either get in or already was in and would just have to, leave the corner, and they'd belly bump the fucking heels, and they'd take more bumps, and then, I think they actually, the last couple of years of their career, they even quit doing the splash because they got to where they couldn't really control it, and they just kind of rolled forward on a guy. Because if they rolled forward, they were only 6 feet tall, but they were 700 pounds apiece. So they had to flap their arms so you could tell whether they were rolling or walking. And they would just kind of fall forward, and it was a roll from the belly to the chest. But one night, oh, God, what was her name? This old lady that was there at ringside for years at the Gardens and had the big beehive hairdo, she got a picture. They put the McGuire twins against all 4 of the managers. Sam Bass, Sir Clements, I think J.C. Dykes, and, oh, God, maybe Jimmy Kent. 4-on-2 handicap. And they did the deal where they shot all the managers in the corner and then did the belly bumps to them. And Sam Bass was in the back. He was in front of the turnbuckle with all the other managers in front. And when they came in, boom, he had white trunks on and black legged. He shit his fucking trunks. And a big fucking brown stain came up on these white trunks. But anyway.
Did you ever see... There was an article, I want to say it was in Wrestling Confidential, in probably like 65, if I had to guess, about Happy Humphrey going to the weight loss clinic and losing a bunch of weight.
As a matter of fact, it's mentioned in one of the Guinness Book of World Records volumes that he later, if I'm not mistaken, at least at that time, held the record for most weight lost.
Oh, no shit.
Because he went from 800 pounds at his height to like 200 and something pounds or whatever.
And then it was I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, have you noticed that this guy, 800 pounds in 1970, was the heaviest human that had ever lived, and now 5 of them have their own fucking TV shows that we know about that are 1,000 pounds apiece. And we have just become a nation of fat fucks. But go ahead.
Remember that picture of him against Haystack Calhoun, and it's just them like meeting in the center of the ring, their bellies touching?
Yeah. Can you imagine having had to see that match?
No. I can't even imagine how they could lock up. How could they even lock up? I don't think because of the size of their bellies. I'm not making a joke or anything. I don't think they could get their arms to touch each other.
No, because, Haystacks, once again, with modernized and all these fat fucks we see on TV, it wasn't that big, but Happy Humphrey had T-Rex arms too. He couldn't reach out in front of his stomach. And it had to be a boom, 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 a very short affair. But, now I guess, think about this. Then, were there any fat guys? Then we started going with the tall guys because Andre got over so good in the 70s. Then everybody needed to be a tall giant. After the early 80s, when the McGuires were gone, Haystacks was gone, Man Mountain Mike was gone, were there any other guys that were specifically in the business because of their tremendous weight that couldn't really do anything? Because then you went to, Yoko, as we saw the other day, he was moving faster than Luger. He could go at that weight. It wasn't like just the fat guy belly bump. Bigelow, wasn't that huge, but he could go. There were, we went to height, And then those guys, some of them couldn't work, but the big weight guys started becoming physical marvels.
I don't know how much IWCCW you ever watched, but there was a guy named Curly Moe. And he was massive.
I remember that, and he had a bald head, right?
Yeah, he did. He talked like Curly from the Three Stooges. Yeah. Curly Moe.
Well, I mean, on the end, there were still, I mean, Dennis Corluzzo had some sizable individuals. The Purple Bomber comes to mind on his shows.
Well, there was the fake either son or grandson, I forget what his story was, of Haystack Calhoun, Boss Hog Calhoun.
Yeah.
Who was just so big and smelly that he figured, if I say I'm related to Haystack, people will believe me, and they did.
But there were on the independents, and probably still are out there today. There's some, as a matter of fact, didn't we see an internet video go viral of some like 500-pound guy trying to do a dive and just falling way short at some point a while back? But anyway, on the independents, there's something. But as a mainstream attraction, the big guy, the fat guys, that's what they were. That's what they were called. The fat guys kind of fell out of favor. I think people started seeing through it. That you had to do something. You couldn't just, because the McGuire twins, bless their hearts, and what sweet, sweet people that they were. But you couldn't be scared of them or intimidated of them, because there's no way they could catch you, and there's almost no way they could whip you, because they were just almost immobile.